Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is the verbatim federal courtroom testimony of the Sean Diddy Combs trial as reported by Inner City Press. The courtroom had already seen bombshells, footage, testimonies, and whispered secrets that shook the entertainment world, but no one was prepared for what came next. A unexpected witness stepped forward, a man who had remained silent for years, a man whose collar signified a life of confidentiality, penance, and forgiveness. He was Diddy's former spiritual advisor, and he came to testify under oath. What he revealed made the courtroom gasp. "He told me he'd already been forgiven because he paid for it," the priest said. And when asked what did he meant by that, the answer chilled everyone. This wasn't just about crimes, this was about a man who believed he was above redemption because he had purchased it. This is the story of the priest who broke his vow of silence and what he exposed about Sean Diddy Combs. The courtroom buzzed with confusion when the prosecution announced a new surprise witness. Even the judge appeared momentarily caught off guard. A name wasn't given. Instead, the court brief simply stated, "Please rise for Father M." Slowly, a man in a plain black cassock walked into the room. His hair was silver, his expression unreadable, and around his neck hung a crucifix, heavy, worn, and clearly older than the man himself. The murmurs began almost immediately. Reporters whispered, jurors exchanged glances. Diddy, sitting at the defendant's table, shifted in his chair for the first time that day. He leaned over to one of his lawyers and asked something under his breath. The answer made his eyes widen, then dart to the man now standing in front of the judge. "This witness has been cleared through emergency review due to the nature of his privileged knowledge and relevance to the accused's state of mind," the prosecution explained. "We ask that the court allow him to share testimony regarding his years as a spiritual advisor to the defendant." That was when the dam broke. The defense team immediately objected, demanding to know how a priest bound by spiritual confidentiality could possibly testify against a man he had counseled. But the prosecution calmly clarified, "Your Honor, this is not a confession heard in the sacrament. This is a series of private spiritual consultations that occurred outside of church grounds and without sacramental protocol. Father M has come forward of his own volition. The judge allowed it." "Proceed," she said, and Father M took the stand. He introduced himself as someone who had worked for over 2 decades in spiritual outreach, often ministering to public figures struggling with guilt, trauma, or lifestyle contradictions. He had been recommended to Diddy in 2012 by another celebrity who he refused to name. He didn't offer absolution. He offered moral reflection, and what he witnessed, he said, terrified him. "I was brought in to offer guidance to a man tormented by his dual life," the priest began. "But what I found was someone who believed redemption could be bought, someone who didn't seek forgiveness. He sought immunity, and with that, the trial entered one of its darkest chapters yet." Father M's testimony stunned the courtroom. He described in vivid detail the first time he was brought to Diddy's estate, not to pray in a chapel or sacred space, but into what he called a manufactured confessional built into the back of a luxury recording studio in Los Angeles. It was early 2013. The priest recalled being driven past security checkpoints and a fleet of black SUVs before being escorted through glass doors into what felt more like a nightclub than a house of God. Diddy greeted him personally, not with reverence, but with calculated charm. "He called me Padre of the Stars, like I was just another prop for his image," Father M testified. He was then led into a candle-lit room draped with velvet curtains, incense burning, and low Gregorian chants playing from a Bluetooth speaker. In the center, 2 chairs facing each other and a third against the wall, empty. It was a parody of sacred space. Father M recalled he had built his own church, one that worshipped power, not grace. Over the course of several sessions, Diddy began revealing disturbing details about his behavior, not just regrets or fears, but declarations of pride in getting away with things others wouldn't dare attempt. He told me one day, "People talk about demons like it's metaphor. I invited mine in and made them work for me." The priest tried to redirect the conversation toward redemption and accountability, but Diddy scoffed. "Why confess if I have already been cleansed?" That's when Father M realized Diddy had a fundamental misunderstanding or deliberate manipulation of what spirituality meant. It wasn't about repentance. It was about validation. The most chilling moment came during their third meeting. Diddy, agitated, spoke of a girl who had threatened to go public with something. "She thinks anyone will believe her over me. I feed entire cities," he said. Then he paused, looked directly at the priest and added, "Besides, I already paid for my sins. You people cash the check." The room fell silent in court. Even the stenographer hesitated. Father M ended that part of his testimony with a warning. This was not a man in search of God. This was a man weaponizing him. As Father M continued, the courtroom atmosphere grew heavier. This wasn't just about what Diddy had done. It was about how he viewed morality itself. The priest said Diddy often spoke about karma accounting, a system he invented in his own mind where every dark act could be cancelled out by a donation, a scholarship, or a charitable headline. He thought morality was math. The priest said he'd say things like, "I gave $1 million to Harlem. Schools last year. That clears 3 sins at least." The court heard that Diddy's philanthropy was strategic, not spiritual. He'd show me the checks before mailing them, Father M testified. He'd say, "This will keep the demons quiet for another year." The priest brought up one particularly disturbing conversation. Diddy had asked if giving to orphanages overseas could offset a few domestic missteps. When the priest asked what he meant by missteps, Diddy grinned and said, "Let's just say some people didn't enjoy the party as much as I hoped." Despite Father M's attempts to guide him toward reflection, Diddy was always resistant. He didn't want penance. He wanted receipts. He believed salvation was a subscription, not a sacrifice. In one session, the priest pushed harder than usual, telling Diddy that no amount of charity could erase intentional harm. Diddy responded with venom. "I've done more for this world than any choir boy. I made people rich. I put people on. Don't lecture me from a book you didn't even write." The priest was shaken. That was the moment I realized he didn't see God as someone to answer to. He saw him as a brand to co-opt. The judge sat stone-faced through the testimony. The jury visibly rattled. The idea that someone could not only do harm, but feel morally armored by money that disturbed people more than the acts themselves. And this was only the beginning. Father M took a sip of water and adjusted his glasses before continuing. "What disturbed me most wasn't the acts he described, but how he described them," he said quietly. He saw sin as a tool, not a failing. And forgiveness. It wasn't something to be earned. He thought it was something you could simply own. The courtroom listened in absolute silence as Father M recalled a session from 2015, just after a widely publicized lawsuit had been quietly settled behind closed doors. Diddy had been unusually tense that day, pacing the room, tossing a gold chain back and forth between his fingers like it was a rosary. Then, out of nowhere, he stopped and looked directly at the priest. He said, "Even if they catch me, even if they come for me tomorrow, I'm clean." When Father M asked what he meant, Diddy smirked and delivered a line that would now echo through the courtroom. "I own my salvation." The room was stunned. I own my salvation. It wasn't a metaphor, he meant it literally. According to Father M. Diddy believed his donations to churches, charities, and high-profile causes had put him in good standing with God. He'd given away millions, more than most priests will see in 10 lifetimes. Diddy reportedly said, "That makes me forgiven whether they like it or not." When the priest attempted to explain that salvation doesn't work like that, Diddy grew hostile. "You want me to kneel? I don't kneel to anyone," he allegedly shouted. "I'm the reason half your pastors drive Bentleys." The priest testified that this exchange caused him a spiritual crisis of his own. "I left that meeting shaken. For days, I questioned whether I had become complicit, that by sitting there listening and not speaking out sooner, I had allowed someone to weaponize God." But the most haunting part came next. Father M. revealed that Diddy kept a painting in that same room, a crucifixion scene, but instead of Jesus, it was a black silhouette in a suit hung not from a cross, but from music notes. "Art is interpretation," Diddy reportedly told him, "and I'm the one doing the remix." As the priest finished recounting the "I own my salvation" moment, the entire courtroom broke into chaos. A juror gasped audibly, clamping a hand over their mouth. Reporters whispered furiously into voice-to-text mics. The courtroom artist's pen paused mid-stroke. For the first time since the trial began, the judge dropped her composure and banged her gavel with visible anger. "Order! I will have order in this courtroom." Diddy, who had remained mostly impassive throughout previous testimonies, was now visibly shaking his head. His lawyer leaned over to whisper something, likely to advise him not to react, but Diddy couldn't stay still. He clasped his hands together like in prayer, but it wasn't spiritual. It was theatrical. Some observers thought he might start crying, but the tears didn't come. The prosecution seized the moment. This testimony demonstrates not just the defendant's actions, but his complete moral detachment from them. This is about mindset. This is about intent. And this is about the belief that wealth can purchase. Diddy's bizarre claims stun court. "I own my salvation." That was the testimony of Father M., a priest who once mentored Diddy. The defense stood up, objecting furiously. "Your Honor, this is a character assassination masked as theology. The church has no jurisdiction in this courtroom." But the judge didn't buy it. He brought the church into this himself. Mr. Walker, the moment he used religion to justify his actions, it became relevant. She allowed the priest to continue now, with more courtroom security positioned closer to Diddy than before. The atmosphere had changed. This wasn't just a trial about crimes anymore. It was a trial about belief systems, about power, and about how morality itself had been twisted for personal protection. Outside the courthouse, media headlines exploded. "I own my salvation. Diddy's bizarre claims stun court," priest testifies. "Diddy thinks he's already forgiven. Gospel of greed. Did he buy redemption inside?" Innocence. The defense stood up, objecting furiously. "Your Honor, this is a character assassination masked as theology. The church has no jurisdiction in this courtroom." But the judge didn't buy it. He brought the church into this himself. "Mr. Walker, the moment he used religion to justify his actions, it became relevant." She allowed the priest to continue now with more courtroom. Security positioned closer to Diddy than before. The atmosphere had changed. This wasn't just a trial about crimes anymore. It was a trial about belief systems, about power, and about how morality itself had been twisted for personal protection. Outside the courthouse, media headlines exploded. "I own my salvation. Diddy's bizarre claims stun court," priest testifies. "Diddy thinks he's already forgiven. Gospel of greed. Did he buy redemption inside?" Father M. remained calm. "You don't understand," he said again. To him, forgiveness wasn't something you receive. It was something you possess. As the courtroom steadied, Father M. shifted to what he called the performance of piety, Diddy's calculated use of religious donations to build the illusion of divine favor. According to The priest, Diddy, donated to more than 20 churches and religious charities between 2010 and 2020, totaling nearly $25 million. But these weren't anonymous tithes. Each came with expectations: a press release, a speaking opportunity, or a chance to stand behind a pulpit and deliver what he called testimonials. He used churches as stages. Father M said he'd walk in wearing designer sunglasses and a diamond cross, hand out envelopes of cash to the choir, and talk about how God had blessed his hustle. People cheered, but it wasn't faith. It was branding. The priest cited one instance in 2017 where Diddy gave $2 million to a mega church, then requested that a sermon about judgment and sin be pulled from their YouTube channel days later. The church complied. He didn't want to hear about sin. He wanted to erase it, Father M said. Even more disturbing was a quote from a recorded conversation between Diddy and another religious leader named Redacted, in which he allegedly said, "The world loves a sinner turned saint. I just skipped the middle part." One of the prosecutors asked, "Father, did he ever confess to anything specific, something criminal?" The priest hesitated. He made illusions, disturbing ones, talked about people who disappeared or had to learn hard lessons, but always wrapped it in metaphor. I believe he knew how far he could go without implicating himself. Still, the implication was clear. He believed himself morally invincible because his spiritual ledger was full of purchased credits. At this point in the trial, it wasn't just the jury that looked disturbed. One Bowif, who had heard dozens of testimonies in past celebrity trials, was caught whispering, "I've never seen anything like this." And it wasn't over. Father M's most damning revelation came when he recounted a moment that chilled him to his core. It was late 2018, and the media had begun circling a handful of stories, whispers about private parties, sealed settlements, and certain celebrities refusing to work with Diddy anymore. While the general public had no clue, Diddy knew something was building. Father M had been summoned back for what he was told would be a spiritual intervention. He expected remorse, maybe fear. But what he found was a man pacing his luxury estate, chains smoking and laughing bitterly at the headlines he had printed out and taped to the walls. He looked at me and said, "Padre, I'm about to be tested, not by God, by them." When Father M asked what he meant, Diddy tossed the papers in the air and smirked. Then he said the line that still echoed through the courtroom. "They think the church is going to stop me. The church can't touch me." Father M sat motionless on the stand. That was when I realized he saw God not as a moral compass, but as a competitor. He didn't believe in divine judgment. He believed in escaping it. The courtroom was silent except for the clack of a reporter's keyboard. "What exactly did he mean?" the prosecutor asked. He believed, truly believed, that as long as he kept writing checks, appearing holy, and owning his narrative, no spiritual institution could ever call him to account. Father M explained. He even said, "The Pope couldn't preach to me with a straight face. I pay more in 1 week than his whole city does in a year."